today is about how do you turn your audit, your internal audit, which everyone has to do, as you know, how can you turn this into an improvement loop that it's not only checkbox, that you really have something valuable done for the company, so and for the system. Therefore, we have three objectives today. That is, first of all, how do you plan your risk-based audit? Then how do you leverage your QMS data, which means what an impact have complaints, CAPAs, change control, and so on into your audit, and how do we drive continuous improvement? Because an audit is not about findings, or it is about findings, but it's not about to have a negative impact. It's really about to drive improvement within processes in the company and make the company even more successful. I'm really pleased that I could convince my dear friend and colleague Bridget to join us today. I told Tracy and Claudia I was looking desperately for an auditor from BSI joining us, because I always think it's of great value if we have someone with us who is really experienced and who can help us to understand the practice of things. I've never thought about Bridget. As I say, my dear friend who is also trainer at BSI for internal audits. Therefore, I would say, let's start, Bridget and I, we will have a discussion in between. And first of all, that's probably a point where we can go into discussion, Bridget and I, why internal audits often fail, because they're not integrated. They're not really part of a teamwork. Bridget, if you want to say maybe a few words just to come into why internal audits often fail. And when I mean often fail, we are not achieving, let's put it this way, why do we not achieve with internal audits what we should achieve, Jeepers?
Okay, so the way I think about this is that the quality management system is a system. It's a set of interlinked processes. There's a feedback loop inside it, and we need to use system thinking in there. And internal audits, and most of what's in Clause 8, is the feedback loop. So if we're thinking of the audits as being a key part of that feedback loop of gathering all the information and then checking in on our system in targeted ways, then that gives us the feedback into corrective actions, into management review, into resourcing, into the other parts of that feedback loop to keep the whole system working well. And the goal of 13485 is to maintain an effective quality management system, and internal audits are vital to that.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, exactly. Internal audits are vital, and what I've seen during internal audits, or working with company, not only doing internal audits, but working with companies, that it's more like there's a requirement, we have to do an internal audit, we have an SOP for an internal audit, let's go through the process, it's done. But that's actually not how it should work. And there's often the discussion within companies. I'm a startup company. It's my first internal audit. I have to do a checkbox audit. And I would say, yes, you have to, because you're maybe not experienced. It's your first audit. You don't know what to expect. But let's be the first audit a checkbox audit. And then let's really go and see that you can form your audit in a risk-driven. And when we say risk-driven, Bridget explained it very well. All processes are related. We have connection between processes, and we should have already identified that we have processes within our quality management system where we have to apply a risk-based approach, which means they are really risky to product, to patient safety, and so on. And that are actually the the processes we should pay attention to, and that is where it starts first. As I say, startup, always a question, how do I start with? Start with your checklist, it's fine, but then develop into a risk-driven audit. Maybe, Bridget, that's again your part. I will hand over to you. That's a definition for the internal audit, and it's a systematic, independent document. I think everyone is clear what is systematic and what is documented. Lots of discussion. 90% within companies when it comes to independent. Can you explain it a bit?
Yeah, and independence can be tricky, especially for small companies, especially for startups, which is where I've done a lot of my work. Independent, 13485 spells out that you can't audit your own work. You can't audit the areas that you're directly responsible for, or where you've written the procedure, or where you're really vested in that process. You can, and you can make it look as though you're independent, but auditors will see through that, and it doesn't work. It doesn't work because it's like proofing your own document. You try and proof your own document. You don't see where the gaps are, where the errors are, because your brain is tuned in to see what you've already written there. And it's the same when you're auditing a process. You need someone to come in with fresh eyes. So in larger companies, that's fine. You can train up people, you can have a team, and it's easy to get that independence. For smaller companies, startups especially, where it's often there's not the resource available. Everyone's wearing different hats, and you can't find anyone who isn't independent enough to be doing even parts of the audit. But you can hire someone like Anne, contractor, to come in and do your internal audits for you, or you can mix it up between other companies. I've worked with a university institute in Auckland, and there sometimes the quality people could audit each other. You have to trust that person. You have to know that they're competent. You need evidence that they're competent, and they need to be qualified within your system. But that can work really well because it's also a learning opportunity on both sides. It gives more experience. If you're going in and auditing another company, you get more experience at it. And you see how other companies are doing things. Auditing is always a privilege. I love it. So, if anyone ever asks you to help them out with their audit, and you can, do a swap even, say yes. Always say yes, because it's always an opportunity. And back to you.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's what I said, and a few people who know me and who already work with me is that I say it would be good if you find someone in the network. That's why I'm always for network. If you find someone in the network, you can exchange and you can even support each other with an audit. Yes, sure, I'm more than happy to come, or Bridget, for an internal audit, and or I'm more than happy to guide you. But it's always good to have another person in it. So so we follow up with a definition. Another thing which comes to us is planned intervals, which means we already said right at the beginning, we need our procedure and we need to plan our audits. They will be quite different when we start, because we haven't done an audit, so we have to audit everything. And then it's always the question, oh my God, do I have to audit everything every year? How do I manage it? Or do I have a big audit once a year? Do I have 4 audits a year? What do I do? Because I also have to ensure that what I have written down, I should do this. That's I have to conform with my procedure, and I have to ensure that, as we say, that everything is implemented as described. Yeah, that's true. That's definitely true. But what I define in my procedure is that I'm auditing and that I have an audit program. And the audit program lays out the let's say, the interval. And Bridget, you may want to say something about, because when we prepared for this webinar, we had a good discussion, and it's always a discussion actually I have with companies. What is a good cycle to plan audits to ensure we have everything in place without overdoing it, right?
Okay, so maybe give me the next slide, Anne, because I think
Yeah.
that's where you had the next part of there we are. So 13485 specifically talks about the audit program, and it says that when you're planning the audit program, you need to consider the status and importance of the processes in the area to be audited and the results of previous audits. So that's already the risk-based thinking coming into play when you're planning your audit program, which is your set of audits. So then what's your audit program going to look like? You know, the traditional one that I see going into companies who haven't thought a lot about it is, well, we just audit everything every year and we've got a nice plan that's all split up nicely. And it doesn't have to be like that. There's nothing that says you have to audit everything every year. There's nothing in 13485 talks about a time frame at all. This is where the risk-based thinking comes in. What are the high-risk processes? So I think of one company that I do internal audits for, and they have design projects that are quite long, often run over a couple of years, and they've usually only got one project running at a time. And so when I dip in and I audit that, I can only look at a part of the project. Also, they always have non-conformities. So for both those reasons, usually audit that process twice a year. But then something like order entry, order fulfillment, those planning, and that bit about organizing manufacturing and interacting with customers, they always get that perfectly right. And that doesn't need to be audited every year. Only if there's changes, if there's changes in that area, or maybe you decide that you want to audit it because you're raising awareness because there are new people or a new manager in that area. But otherwise, you can audit that every 2 or 3 years. So you can have a 2-year cycle or a 3-year cycle. And we don't have to do it based on years, but that's the way we do all our other planning in business. So it's usually easier to stick with that. So risk-based thinking all the way through. Anne.
So yeah, I think that covers this, and hopefully that answers a few of the questions you already had in terms of planning and what do I have to audit, and what is a good audit cycle. The other thing is when we are talking, when we are talking about risk-driven internal audits, there are a few things. One thing is ISO 13485 already said, hey, you have processes where you should apply a risk-based approach. Obviously, and Bridget made it clear, these are the processes which should be audited on a regular basis. There is a reason for why there is a risk-based approach. The other thing is, and it was also explained, it's about the criteria, the scope, and the frequency, and what methods are used for this part or for this internal audit. And again, as we said, there's nothing made in stone. If we have a change, if we have, as Bridget said, if we have changes in supplier, if we have challenges, if we have, let's say, people changing jobs, etc., all this can have an impact of our audit program. So, I mean, I have a program. If I have to change it, fine. That's exactly what should happen. And that's when I come in as an auditor, I can see this company is really applying a risk-based approach even to the audit process, because, okay, they took responsibility, there was a change, and instead of waiting till the next year or till the next management review, they decided to go in with an audit. So that is actually what we expect, right? And yeah, that's what we said. Again, have a look into your processes and what is the extent? What is the impact on patient safety? What is even there is not a or even the process was meant to be in the, let's say, in an annual loop, but let's say there are negative feedbacks, there are changes, even there are changes to locations, machinery, whatsoever. Think about change your audit program. The other thing is again, frequency. Just make it risk-based. And important, the question is, oh, how do I do it? The question is, it really depends on how your company is organized, and maybe Bridget want to say to this one is, but let's say you have monthly quality meetings, for example, and something pops up. You should reflect this in your audit plan or in your audit program and say, oh, that might be reason to change this and to go on, I don't know, to change the audit program or the next audit plan. Do you want to add something to this, Bridget?
I think nothing's coming to my head at the moment. I think you've covered everything that, maybe not. Maybe just stepping back and thinking about how we look at risk. So on these slides, Anne's talking about the using risk to assess how you change your audit program. But these slides also apply to how do we do an individual, how do we pull together an individual audit plan? The point around changes and responding to changes. Anytime you see something significant change within your organization, you should consider an audit. And I can think of many things in there. Let's say the economy is going downhill and we have a bit of contraction and people are laid off. Do you think that's going to have an impact on quality in the company? Absolutely, certainly. It always does, because people's morale is affected. Or let's say you've gone into scale-up mode and suddenly you're hiring people, and those people may not come from the medical device sector, especially in New Zealand. You're often lucky when you get people who come from that sector to fill a lot of roles. Again, that's introducing risk because they're not tuned into the way other people are thinking. Time to go in and strengthen that, because audits go in and they look at the areas where things might need to change or be strengthened, but they're an educational process in themselves for new people. It's the way to actually have an opportunity to talk to the people in the process and help them understand. Anne.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, because changes can come from different, or can be introduced from regions. And yeah, I haven't thought about it.
Yeah, I've experienced it.
Yeah. We already have spoken about it. The timelines. That slide actually is really gives you an overview how you could prioritize. And as Bridget and I again had a good discussion in preparation for this webinar. So I think high priority is absolutely clear. It is a focus area. It's a risk-based approach is already applied. So which actually, and that's where we have also a loop. We have our process overview, which 13.5 requires. So, and within this process overview, you should have kind of red flagged your processes where you apply a risk-based approach. So what you should do is definitely you should say, okay, that are my risk-based processes. Are they on an annual base or quarterly or whatsoever? Are they on a regular base? However, I define regular. Are they on a regular base in my audit plan and not only every 3 years? That is one thing. And the other thing, the discussion we had was actually, for example, the processes going along our QMS. And when I say going along our QMS, for example, document control actually is related to every process we have in our QMS. So which means as an internal auditor, I have a look every time, because I have a look into documents and see, or have they applied document control? I'm not auditing directly document control, the document control process, but I have a look into documents and I see, oh, okay, that's so. As soon as I see a red flag and say, oh, wait, hold on, that is a different template. I have the same process, but that is a different template version. Let me check it again to see if document or record control are in the right place. But that happens because, as I say, I'm already auditing another process, right? So if I see a red flag, I would say, okay, document control, document and record control is not on my list, but I might put it on my list because that wasn't okay for me. So that's also how I develop the audit or change the audit program, how it can happen. So, but as I say, that would be an overview about how we can prioritize audits. That is a good question. What is the difference if I audit a high-risk process, or let's say document control, which I would say it's not a high risk? Actually, for me, there is no difference. So point. There is no difference. What we do is probably, if we can speak about difference, what there is differently, I go really into detail. If I have a high-risk process, I really go into detail. I link documents, I link evidence, which is really important. So which means when we are in 13.5 and there's this requirement that I have to identify link processes, which means one output from one process is an input in the next process, and this output is so. Anyway, I have, let's say, a sequence of processes linked together through input and output. What I do is I really go and follow this traceability to really ensure I have this sequence right and everything links together, and really to ensure that everything works together and is as expected. That would probably one of the things. And the other things, if I have a look into high risk processes, I definitely would investigate if I can see trends, if there are trends available. Is it the same? Do we have no changes, or do I have findings? Do I have an increase in findings? All of those things. Is there anything you would add, Bridget, where you would pay more attention to it?
Yes, my mind has gone in a slightly different direction related to this, but in a lot of the companies I have worked with, there've been startups, and design controls are a big deal. And often the teams aren't quite so experienced. So if I take the example of, so Anne was talking about, diving deep, following an audit trail through. And one thing I know is that it's where Anne was talking about related processes, connecting processes. It's often at the interfaces between those processes where things can get dropped, information can get dropped in the handover from one process to another. So that's always a risk area. I've seen some spectacular dropping of things in some of those cases. So always look at those interfaces. But coming back to design controls, where there are lots of interfaces. Oops, what's happened? I've lost my screen.
We can see you. It's okay.
Can you? Oh, all right. Well, I'll just keep talking and then I'll find you again. Yeah. So when I'm looking at a test report, say, I'll be looking at, is the objective clear? Does the conclusion flow through the logic of the report, and the conclusion then takes the data and relates it to what the objective was? And if I find that that's not right, and the report's been released, signed off, well, there are some obvious things that need to be worked at in there. One one of them is coming back. So we were talking about training, but training is about competence. It's a competence clause. So are we lacking in some level of competence here? Obviously in the person who pulled the report together, but also that report's been approved by someone. And this applies to all documents throughout the QMS, procedures, test reports, whatever. Do the people who are reviewing, and in that case, did the person who was reviewing really understand what they should be doing when they were reviewing that report? How did a test report end up with a conclusion that everything's hunky-dory when the data didn't actually indicate that the objective of the test was met? So that now sends me down another trail of thinking, okay, so do we need to take some corrective action in there? Is there a problem around reviewing documents? And so your thinking can go, even just looking at one document, can go down quite a lot of trails in the QMS. Okay, I'll hand over there and I'll try and find everyone again.
Okay, yeah. So
here we are.
Did you find us again? Okay,
yes,
yeah.
I found you all again.
So that's actually what Bridget said, and what we have spoken about before. It's just like really this linkage, the linkage we have between processes, between signals, where's the input, what are the signals actually when they have to act. And again, it's another part is, do we have to do an internal audit? Do I have to do a management review? What do I have to do? What I have to do to improve or to improve a process, or to make sure that the outcome of a process is as expected. So it's up, I would say, up to the team to decide. But as we say, try to find the right words. We have a few more processes in our QMS system which can lead, or which can lead to another audit, or which can lead to changing an audit plan because we apply a risk-based audit plan approach. And if we have complaints coming in, we place our device on the market. We start to investigate that. Even we have no official complaints from clients, but we start to understand that there might be a few issues on the market, or we have non-conformities, not on the market, but in-house. Unfortunately, we are lucky enough to figure them out before the product goes out, or as Bridget said before, we have changes in the supplier chain, and somewhere within the company, people change, and so on and so on. This all has an impact on how we approach audits, and how we change. Again, that is, I would say, that is the important piece to understand is, even we have the program and even we have a plan for our next audit, it's not set in stone. If we experienced, as I say, incidents, complaints, whatsoever, we should change it. And for example, another thing is, if you come as an external auditor, Richard, not as an internal auditor, you have an external audit, and during the audit, exactly this happens. When we figure out, obviously, we have people who are not skilled based on what we saw. There is no one to blame. That's, by the way, that's another thing we should talk about. There's no one to blame. No one should be blamed for findings we have in audits. No one should be blamed. We all should be interested in changing it to make it right, and to make the process improving. So let's say if there are findings about that obviously people are not skilled and so on, this has an impact on our trainings program. This has obviously an impact because no one said we didn't train people before. But that obviously means we need to sit together and we need to find a proper trainings plan, a proper approach. We have to talk to the process owner and we have to talk to management because we need money. We need money to educate people. So that is an impact of often risk-based audit. Another thing we were talking about are the trigger for audit planning. Bridget, you said something before. Would you mind to jump in here? What is the
remind me, Anne, what did I say before?
When we were talking about the triggers, so there are supplier changes. We have changes, product and so on.
Changes, change control. Anywhere where there are changes, and especially in newer organizations where the quality management isn't so mature, not everyone grasps that pretty much all changes within an organization are going to have some impact.
Hello.
Do an audit, and you're not necessarily going to jump in and do an audit straight away either. It's when's the right time to go in and do an audit, depending on the circumstances. But that means I used to say, when I was a quality manager, I used to say I had antennae in the back of my head to always be listening to that was in a larger organization, that to always be listening to what was going on in the organization. And I worked with a startup where we used Slack for communication. So I'd sit on the ferry on the way home and I'd be reading what was going on in all the channels to try and figure out, okay, what's going on in this organization. So there are formal ways we, as Anne is talking about here, where we actually can measure. But what Anne's been talking about, we're talking about two processes. There's the process of auditing, and there's the process of managing the audit program. And there should be, someone should be aware that they are the program manager. That's obviously not a dedicated role in a small company, but someone is a process owner for the audit program and needs to be constantly thinking about, right, when do we need to respond to all of these things? Now, some of those things that I'd pick up sitting on the ferry didn't need an audit as a response. They just needed me to go talk to people. Other times, it was going to trigger an audit. And back to you.
Yeah. That's a good point. As well, it's not only what is let's say what is obvious. It's also what happens on channels or what I am aware of while I'm in a kitchen, have a coffee with someone, and overhear a conversation, which I think, oh no, I didn't want to hear this, that I should have. And it's not because people want, let's say, to challenge us or whatsoever as a quality and regular person. Sometimes it's really because they don't know. And I can only make them aware. I can have discussion all the time. Sure, I can. But I better go and check and say, hey, listen, that's a process your process owner has documented. If you're not following for different reason, we should adjust and we should make it right to ensure that follow the same process. As I say, we have to be careful and we have to raise awareness that with an audit, we are not blaming anyone. We only want to make sure that people doing all the time the same thing, that we have the same results, we can expect the same results. And if people coming into the company, new into the company, and we have processes which are really, really settled, that gives us great security because we know that are processes we can follow. And we see they can't follow, we might have a people issue. So that is another point, right?
Yeah, another one I'll just throw in quickly is that it's worth remembering that when people are under stress, for whatever reason, when people are under stress, they tend to default to action, not default to reading the procedure or talking to quality. And that's something that always has to be borne in mind. So if there's stress in part of an organization, for whatever reason, you need to be focusing in on going in and monitoring and checking things.
Yeah, exactly. So, and speaking about findings, another really, really important thing is if even a startup, it's if I'm not an experienced auditor and I just start as well as my team did, what I should do is I should write findings that people can understand and people can action, and it's pretty clear. It's obvious what wasn't right. So and I think this example speaks for itself. I don't need to explain it, but this is really, really important within the company that I say, okay, that's an internal audit. I have the findings and I make pretty clear what it is. I name the procedure, which obviously didn't go right. Best thing is I have related documentation that in a follow-up we can really check and we can hold it against newer ones to see that we have an improvement and so on. So that is another point.
Can I throw something in there, Anne?
Yes.
When I teach about writing up non-conformities, one of the key points about that objective evidence for a finding is that it has to be verifiable. The auditee needs to be able to go back and check what it is that you found, or whoever it is that gets handed the problem to deal with. So that's one part of it. And a good non-conformity is written up so that it's very clear. What's the requirement that's been broken? A statement of how the requirement was broken, and then the evidence for it. And when I teach this, I usually train people to write those as three separate things to just get the logic straight. But often we will write it normally, as Anne has done, in one sentence or one paragraph. Though I tend to like bullet points, but that's how I think.
Yeah, and that was a good comment because as you said, with startups we start, so we don't expect what is experience. And to be fair, for all the startups here, as an external auditor, they don't expect you when they read your first internal audit report. They expect it to be a 100% as you would expect from someone who has experience. That is another point. They will probably point you and say, hey, it would be better if you do this and this and this. But I have never seen, that's what I have to say. I have never seen that there was an internal audit which came up with major findings in an external audit. What happens if, which I don't know why companies forget for whatever reason, when you go for an external audit, and you apply for an external audit and they come for a stage 1 audit, you have an internal audit needs to be done. So you have to do an internal audit. Even that's another question, but we haven't launched a product on a market. Yeah, that's fine. But you have done development, you have document control in place, and so on and so on and so on. You won't have all processes in place, but what they do then is they can do a review of the processes in place and used already, and they will check if you have all processes in place which are needed to take care that when your product is in the market, you can do what you're supposed to do. So therefore, it's always a discussion of why do I need to do an internal audit because there's nothing, but yeah, you have to. Another discussion Bridget and I had was when we are talking about the improvement pipeline, which only means is when I have findings, I have to action them, and therefore I introduce improvement, the classification, and that's actually when we talk about major, minor, observation, or opportunities for improvement. Would you mind to say 3 sentences to us, Bridget?
Okay, so there's I recommend that people use the same classification, the same definitions in there that the external auditors use, and then that keeps everything straightforward. So a major non-conformity is where a clear non-compliance with 13485 or something that's a safety risk that could make it out to the customer. So that's number one. A minor non-conformity is something that's not such a big deal, but it's still a non-conformity. So maybe it's an implementation error once or twice, but not major. But it's still a non-conformity. Still need to do cause analysis. The one that people don't always understand is observation. And an observation, you can think of it as a near miss. A non-conformity is something that might have been written up an observation is something that might have been written up as a non-conformity, but there's not enough evidence. Or it could be something that, if the status quo continues, could result in a non-conformity. So that still needs to be taken seriously. If it's a certification audit, they might not follow up on it, but if it's an internal audit, definitely should be followed up on. That still needs cause analysis and corrective action. And then an opportunity for improvement, well, that's a little more wide open. You can do what you want with that in your group, because that's a recommendation. Anne.
Yeah, that's a recommendation. And that's what I say often when I do internal audits. I will have an audit report, and I will have an extra report for opportunities for improvement. Why? Because sometimes you don't want to point an external auditor to this one. So they should do their own findings. That's just, and sometimes it's just to give recommendations to make it easier, to make it safer, whatsoever. So again, what do we have? We have a classification, then we decide what we do. Do we do correction, or do we go really in a formal kappa, or is there an escalation, and so on? What do we have to do? Then we have to define, for example, what is a closure time? Do we have trends to see? And the other one is definitely see what Bridget said. That's a follow. I would call it a follow-up, right? If you have a finding and then it, and then later on we have to go back and just see what happened with this one. That is what we were just speaking of. After the audit, what are we doing? We, as an internal auditor, check if you have repeats. Sure, that's what you do. Therefore, you have a look into audit reports which are older. Then what is the closure time? The findings, they are actioned on time, which means with an external audit, you have a timeline. They want to see they give you a timeline. You have to close the non-conformity. And that's what you should do with an internal audit as well. And you should see if you match this closure time. The other thing is we were talking about signals before the improvement process I introduced. Can I see that we have less signals, which means did the process really improve? That is an important thing. And the other one, and that is always a challenge, did leadership act? Did we have really management action? And again, that is not to blame anyone. That is really, even as a startup, we have to learn as an internal auditor and as a company as we grow, that we have to engage management, and that management has to engage in the whole quality management system. This is a learning curve for all of us. Right, and then we have a mini case how we or what would be what we could do, or how it would look like. So let's say we have a signal would be that's I think everyone can read, but we have a software update, and we have repeated complaints about whatsoever usability or other bugs, failures, security, and so on. But just in a row, it's not one complaint or one failure. I just like I can see there is on a dashboard there are lots of tickets. So after an update, that could be one signal. So what I do is then I change for example, I change probably my audit program, as I say, okay, I go into software development, or I changed my audit plan. I say I have a look into the change process. Maybe there's an issue, and then I have a look after the audit that probably what did we change to improve the whole process. So let's say I figured out there was probably an issue with my change control process. I might change my change board. It depends on what tools I use. That's another point. I might change my change control board. I might change any risk checklist or whatever I have. But that is, let's say, that would be a full audit, improvement cycle. Let's put it this way. I find an issue, I figure out where the issue comes from, and then I improve. That's actually the audit cycle, right? So let's summarize today. That is what we said, focus on risk. As Bridget and I agreed, if it's your first audit, sure, you can't, you won't do this, and you don't need to challenge yourself. But as you go, while you develop as a company and while you develop your system, it's just like focus. When we say focus on risk, you start with processes you already have, applied a risk-based approach, and then as you go with criticality. Listen to signals. That is another point. See what signals what signals you can find, and then be really strict when it comes to implementation of changes. That's actually what you do, right? When you have a finding, you have to implement a change, and verify that this change comes with the outcome you want to have, and change the process. It makes sense. Bridget, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I've been thinking about the risk-based. Well, two aspects I'm thinking about. When we're working in quality generally, and for auditing, we need to be thinking about the quality management system as a system. Thinking, it's that joined up thinking. If you're not thinking about it as a system when you're auditing, the inputs, the outputs, transformations, the linkages and interactions, then you're just going to be skimming over the surface. You need to be looking at all the different connections all the time. And that's a change to your way of thinking. And once you've got that way of thinking, it really does make a difference. So that's one way of thinking. And the other one is we keep talking about risk-based thinking. To simplify that, to distill that right down to its essence, it's looking at any situation, looking at the overall QMS, looking at a particular process, looking at any aspect of what you're doing in life, really, and saying, okay, what can go wrong here? It's the simplest question, but it's the essence of risk thinking. What can go wrong here? And then if you're auditing, what can go wrong, and are there appropriate controls in here to prevent this from going wrong? And responding.
Yeah.
Okay.